Who doesn't need a quick laugh to go along with some food for thought? Hello, I'm Dan Hill, the host of Scrambled Eggs, Tips and Tactics for Tackling Tough Business Problems. Today's guest is the renowned business futurist, Jonathan Brill. His book, Rogue Waves, Future-Proof Your Business to Survive and Profit from Radical Change, shows leaders how their companies can adapt, survive, and thrive in times of radical disruption caused by the convergence of economic, technological, and social change. Jonathan, you've been given 5 terms and a diabolical definition for each from my new book, Blah, 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 A Snarky Guide to Office Lingo. There's a little truth in every joke. Of those 5 options, which one is your favorite and why?
So for me, Rogue Waves is really about you laid out 5 of them: the 5-year plan, paradigm shifts, SWOT analysis, trend spotting, and we need to be strategic. And for me, it's really about trend spotting. It's about guessing what's the light at the end of the tunnel and what it might actually be instead of what we want it to be. And to me, like, I take a look at those diabolical terms, and the reality is they're all so interrelated. And that's really what the book's about: how to make decisions about what to do next when you
Sure.
don't.
And indeed, in our longer interview on my podcast, we will be going into human fallacies and foibles and why all these terms apply so much indeed to the strategic decision-making process, which is often not so strategic as it should be. Now, in turn, I want to move to your book, Rogue Waves. Of course, you have all sorts of terminology you introduce in that book. What for you would be a key term and what's its importance?
So obviously, rogue waves. We hear about black swan events, these unpredictable changes that disrupt the future. But the reality is that most black swans actually aren't. That they're actually rogue waves. They're unmanageable events that are caused by the collision of individually manageable waves of change. COVID being an example, the 2008 financial crash being an example. And in many cases, we can understand when and where that they're likely to occur. But more importantly, we can become more resilient to them, and we can exploit them when they happen. And that's important in our increasingly volatile world, because companies with a more resilient growth strategy, they tend to do better.
Okay. And what is your number one tactic or tip you might give companies to try to avoid getting drowned by these rogue waves?
Adam Grant was kind enough to blur my book, and he described it as an actionable framework for driving change instead of being blindsided by it. And that's exactly what it is. And if there's one piece of advice I could provide, it's to understand. I'm really going today, man. It's to understand the game before you choose which strategy to play. The trick isn't to look at every possible rogue wave, to look at every possible piece of radical change. It's to understand how they would impact you, how massive volatility would impact your finances, your operations, your environment, and your strategy, and how could you turn these to your advantage.
Okay, that's fair enough. I want to thank you, Jonathan, so much for being on Scrambled Eggs. I'm your host, Dan Hill, the author of Blah, 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 A Snarky Guide to Office Lingo.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.